The bullet that changed everything traveled at 2,800 feet per second through the scorching Arizona air, fired from a rooftop 400 yards away by a man whose hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the rifle steady. Alejandro El Tigre Mendoza had spent 3 weeks planning this shot, 3 weeks studying the Mongols' MC's annual rally in Laughlin, Nevada, 3 weeks convincing himself that what he was about to do was necessary for business, for respect, for survival in a world that punished weakness with death. He'd been aiming for Wade Hammer Stone, the national president of the Mongols, the man whose organization had cost the Jalisco New Generation cartel $8 million in the last 6 months through intercepted shipments, burned stash houses, and a level of coordinated interference that suggested someone was feeding them intelligence. The crosshairs had been steady on Stone's chest, his finger already applying pressure to the trigger, when a young woman with dark hair stepped directly into his line of fire at the exact wrong moment. Maya Stone had been laughing at something her boyfriend Derek had said, her hand wrapped around a bottle of water, her face flushed from dancing to the live band that had been playing covers of classic rock for the last hour. The Laughlin rally was her first time attending one of her father's club events since she'd left for college at UC San Diego 2 years earlier. She'd been hesitant to come, had spent most of her freshman and sophomore years trying to distance herself from the Mongols, from the violence and chaos that had defined her childhood, from the constant fear that one day her father wouldn't come home. But Wade had called her personally, his voice carrying that particular mixture of authority and vulnerability that she could never resist, and asked her to come because it had been too long since they'd spent real time together. "Just one weekend, Maya Bear," he'd said, using the nickname from when she was 5 years old. "Your old man's not getting any younger, and I miss my daughter." The bullet hit her in the chest, just below her left collarbone, the impact spinning her backwards into Derek's arms with a force that seemed impossible for something so small. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, nobody understood what had happened. The music kept playing, people kept laughing. The Nevada sun kept beating down on the thousands of bikers and their families who'd gathered for 3 days of brotherhood, barbecue, and celebrating the lifestyle they'd chosen. Then Maya's blood started spreading across her white tank top in a crimson bloom that looked almost artistic against the fabric, and Derek started screaming, and Wade Stone's world shattered into pieces that would never fit back together the same way again. If you're ready to witness how a single bullet transformed a celebration into the most brutal war the Southwest has ever seen, how a father's grief became a reckoning that would consume 2 organizations and leave hundreds of lives destroyed, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story will take you into the darkest corners of revenge, justice, and the terrible price of violence that spirals beyond anyone's control. The next 72 hours would see the mobilization of the largest outlaw motorcycle force in American history, and would force federal agents to make choices that would haunt them for the rest of their careers. Wade Stone was signing autographs for a group of prospects from the San Bernardino chapter when he heard the screams. His first instinct, honed by decades of violence and survival, was to look for the threat, to assess the situation with the tactical mind that had kept him alive through 3 wars with rival clubs and countless encounters with law enforcement. He saw the crowd parting, saw Derek cradling someone in his arms, saw blood that seemed impossible in its quantity spreading across the asphalt. Then he saw the dark hair, the specific shade that matched his own, and his brain refused to process what his eyes were showing him. That couldn't be Maya. Maya was safe. Maya was in college studying pre-med, saving lives instead of being caught in the violence that had claimed so many others. Maya was his baby girl, his pride, the one part of his life that had turned out right despite all his mistakes. Marcus Bull Patterson reached Wade first, the vice president's massive frame creating a shield as he pulled his president toward Maya, his voice cutting through the chaos with military precision. "Clear a path! Get the paramedics! Move, goddammit, move!" Bull had lost his younger brother to gang violence 15 years ago, had found him bleeding out in an alley in Oakland with nobody there to help, and he'd sworn he'd never let that happen to someone he cared about again. He'd been a boxer before the club, had hands that could kill a man with a single punch, but now those same hands were gentle as they helped lower Maya onto the ground and started applying pressure to the wound that was pumping blood with each heartbeat. "Stay with us, Maya. Your dad's here. We've got you." Tommy Reaper Chen was already on his radio, coordinating with club security while simultaneously scanning rooftops with eyes that had been trained by 3 tours in Afghanistan to spot snipers and threats that normal people wouldn't see. The former Marine's mind was calculating trajectories, estimating distances, processing the angle of Maya's wound and the direction she'd been facing when the bullet hit. "Shooters northeast, probably the Riverside Hotel, 4th or 5th floor," he called out to the security team, his voice calm despite the PTSD that was already starting to claw at the edges of his consciousness, bringing back memories of other shootings, other blood, other people he'd failed to protect. "Lock down all exits. Nobody leaves this rally until we know who did this." Wade dropped to his knees beside his daughter, his hands hovering over her body like he was afraid touching her would make it worse, make it real. Maya's eyes found his, wide with shock and fear and something that looked like apology. "Daddy," she whispered, blood bubbling at the corner of her mouth. "I'm sorry. I should have stayed away. This is my fault." The words hit him harder than any bullet could have, the knowledge that his daughter was apologizing for being shot, that she'd somehow internalized the idea that being his child made her responsible for the violence that had found her. "No, baby. Number. This is not your fault. You're going to be okay. The paramedics are coming. You're going to be fine." But even as he said it, he could see the amount of blood soaking into the asphalt, could see the way her skin was turning pale, could see death hovering at the edges of this moment like a vulture waiting for its meal. Isabella Stone pushed through the crowd with the authority of a trauma nurse who'd spent 20 years working in emergency rooms and had seen every kind of injury the human body could sustain. She'd been Wade's wife for 23 years, had raised Maya while her husband was building an empire, had made peace with the life they'd chosen even as she hated what it sometimes cost them. "Move!" she commanded, dropping her bag and immediately assessing the wound with professional detachment that masked the terror screaming inside her head. Through and through, missed the subclavian artery by maybe half an inch. She's going into shock. Where the hell are those paramedics? Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, packing the wound, checking vitals, doing everything she could while knowing it might not be enough, that sometimes you could do everything right and still lose the person you loved. 400 yards away, Alejandro El Tigre Mendoza was breaking down his rifle with shaking hands, his mind refusing to process what he'd just done. He'd missed. After 3 weeks of preparation, after countless hours studying Wade Stone's movements and habits, after promising Sofia La Reina Vega that he could make this shot and trigger the war she wanted, he'd missed his target and hit an innocent girl instead. The crosshairs had been perfect, his breathing had been controlled, everything had been exactly as he'd trained. But the girl had moved at the wrong moment, had stepped into the kill zone just as his finger completed the trigger pull, and now, instead of a clean assassination that would have been celebrated in CJNG circles, he'd committed the kind of mistake that got soldiers killed by their own organizations. His phone buzzed with a text from Sofia. "Confirm kill." His hands were shaking so badly he could barely type the response. Missed. Hit civilian instead. Female. The 3 dots indicating she was typing seemed to pulse for an eternity before her response came through. "Return to safe house immediately. Do not contact anyone. We will fix this." But Alejandro knew there was no fixing what he'd just done. He'd started a war, just not the one Sofia had wanted. He'd attacked a child at a family event, had violated the one rule that even the most ruthless criminals tried to respect. The Mongols wouldn't just come for him, they'd come for everyone, and they wouldn't stop until bodies were stacked so high that even the desert couldn't hide them all. The paramedics arrived within 4 minutes, a response time that would have been impressive in a city but was nearly miraculous at a rally 40 miles from the nearest trauma center. They loaded Maya onto the gurney with efficiency born from too much practice, their hands moving in choreographed patterns while Isabella called out vital signs and medical history. 19 years old, no known allergies, takes birth control pills, no other medications. Entry wound left anterior chest, exit wound posterior left shoulder, approximately .308 caliber based on wound characteristics. Pulse is thready at 120. BP dropping, she's maybe lost 800 cc already. You need to move fast. The lead paramedic nodded, recognizing a fellow medical professional, and they were loading Maya into the ambulance when Wade tried to climb in with her. "Sir, you can't," the paramedic started, but the look on Wade Stone's face made him stop mid-sentence. This wasn't a man who would be told what he could or couldn't do, especially not when his daughter was dying. Bull stepped forward smoothly, his massive presence a diplomatic intervention. "My president rides with his daughter. I'll drive his bike to the hospital. You want to argue about it, or you want to save the girl's life?" The paramedic made the smart choice, nodding curtly and helping Wade into the ambulance. As the doors closed and the siren began to wail, Isabella grabbed Bull's arm hard enough to leave bruises. "Find who did this, Marcus. Find them before Wade does something that destroys everything we've built." Tommy, Reaper Chen, was already coordinating the response before the ambulance was out of sight. His military training had kicked in automatically, overriding the PTSD that whispered that he'd failed another mission, another life lost on his watch. "Lock down this entire area. Nobody leaves without being searched and photographed. I want statements from everyone within visual range of where Maya was standing. Get our tech guys pulling security footage from every camera within half a mile, and get me a head count of every CJNG member we know is in Nevada. Somebody planned this, and I want to know who, why, and where they're hiding before sunrise." Vincent "Ghost" Martinez watched the chaos unfold from his position near the main stage, his face carefully neutral despite the storm of conflicting emotions tearing through his chest. He'd been deep undercover with the Mongols for 3 years, feeding intelligence to the DEA about drug distribution networks and weapons trafficking, and in that time he'd come to genuinely respect these men who society had written off as criminals. Wade Stone had been good to him, had trusted him with responsibilities and information that would send dozens of people to prison when the operation finally concluded. And now, Wade's daughter had been shot, possibly by the same cartel that Vincent's DEA handlers were trying to build a case against. And Vincent knew things that could help find the shooter, but revealing them would blow his cover and destroy 3 years of work. His phone buzzed with an encrypted message from his handler, Agent Sarah Morrison. "Shooting confirmed as CJNG operation. Sofia Vega authorized hit on Stone. Shooter missed target. Do not break cover. Repeat, do not break cover. We're too close to bringing down Vega's entire network." Vincent stared at the message, at the cold tactical calculation that weighed one girl's life against the potential to arrest dozens of cartel members, and felt something break inside him. He'd joined the DEA because his sister had died from a fentanyl overdose, because he wanted to stop the people who destroyed families with poison and violence. But what was he becoming if he let those same people destroy families right in front of him because it was tactically convenient? Within an hour, every Mongols chapter west of the Mississippi had received the alert. Code Red, President's daughter shot at Laughlin Rally, suspected CJNG operation. All members report for mobilization. The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. Chapters from California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, and even Colorado were putting aside rivalries, debts, and personal business to answer the call. By midnight, over 1,500 bikers were already on the road toward Nevada. By dawn, that number would swell to 3,500, the largest mobilization of outlaw motorcycle clubs in modern history. They came from cities and small towns, from legitimate jobs and criminal enterprises, from families who begged them not to go, and from prison cells they'd been paroled from just days earlier. They came because Maya Stone was family, because attacking a child at a rally meant attacking every family there, because some lines could never be crossed without consequences that would reshape the criminal landscape forever. Sofia La Reina Vega sat in her climate-controlled office in Guadalajara, watching news reports of the shooting on 3 different screens while her mind calculated the implications of Alejandro's failure. At 48 years old, she'd spent 2 decades climbing the ranks of the Jalisco New Generation cartel through a combination of ruthless intelligence, strategic marriages, and a willingness to eliminate anyone who underestimated her because of her gender. She'd wanted this war with the Mongols, had orchestrated it carefully by having Alejandro take the shot without authorization from the cartel's actual leadership. Her plan had been elegant: assassinate Wade Stone, trigger a war between the Mongols and CJNG's current leadership, then step in as the voice of reason who could negotiate peace while simultaneously eliminating her rivals within the cartel who would be blamed for the unnecessary conflict. But Alejandro had missed. And now, instead of a clean assassination of a criminal leader, she had the shooting of a college girl at a family event. The optics were catastrophic, the kind of mistake that turned public opinion and law enforcement pressure to unbearable levels. Worse, she knew the Mongols wouldn't care about cartel politics or internal power struggles. They would come for blood, would destroy everything and everyone associated with CJNG until they felt justice had been served. She needed to adjust her plan, needed to use this disaster to her advantage somehow. Her phone rang with a call from Joaquin El Jefe Morales, the current head of CJNG operations in the United States and the man she'd been planning to eliminate. "Sophia, what the hell happened in Nevada? Alejandro works for you. Did you authorize this?" Her response was calm, measured, the voice of a woman who'd learned to lie while maintaining complete credibility. "Joaquin, I'm as shocked as you are. Alejandro was supposed to be gathering intelligence, nothing more. If he took this shot, he did it without my knowledge or approval. But we need to handle this carefully. The Mongols are mobilizing. I'm hearing reports of thousands of bikers heading toward our operations. We need to prepare for war." What she didn't say was that she'd already leaked information about Joaquin's location to the Mongols through a carefully constructed trail of digital breadcrumbs. With luck, they'd kill him within 48 hours, removing her primary rival while she positioned herself as the leader who could end the conflict she'd started. Maya Stone had been in surgery for 3 hours when the surgeon finally emerged to speak with Wade and Isabella. Dr. Kenneth Park looked exhausted, his scrubs stained with blood, his eyes carrying the particular weight of a trauma surgeon who just spent hours trying to save a life that kept threatening to slip away. "She's alive," he said immediately, knowing that was the only information that mattered in that first moment. The bullet missed her major vessels by less than a centimeter, but it did significant damage to her lung and caused internal bleeding that we had to repair. She's stable now, but the next 48 hours are critical. If she makes it through without infection or complications, her prognosis is good. She's young, she's strong, and your wife's quick action probably saved her life." Wade Stone, the man who commanded thousands of outlaws and had personally killed at least 7 men in his life, broke down and cried in that hospital hallway with a force that seemed like it might tear him apart. Isabella held him, her own tears silent and controlled, and for a moment they were just 2 parents who'd almost lost their child, not the president of a criminal organization and his trauma nurse wife. Bull and Tommy stood watch at either end of the hallway, giving them privacy while simultaneously making sure nobody could interrupt this moment. After several minutes, Wade pulled himself together with visible effort, wiping his eyes and straightening his leather cut. "I need to see her. She's unconscious and will be for at least another 12 hours, Dr. Park explained gently. "The anesthesia?" But Wade was already moving toward the recovery room, his face set in an expression that made it clear nothing would stop him. The doctor wisely stepped aside, leading them to where Maya lay surrounded by machines and tubes, her face pale against the white sheets, her chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity. Wade approached like he was walking on holy ground, his calloused hands surprisingly gentle as he touched his daughter's hand. "I'm here, Maya Bear. Daddy's here, and I'm going to find who did this. I'm going to find them, and I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone again." Bloco 2/3, aproximadamente 3,000 palavras. Vincent Ghost Martinez sat in the Mongols' clubhouse war room 12 hours after the shooting, surrounded by 40 of the club's most senior members as they planned a campaign of destruction that would dwarf anything the outlaw world had ever seen. Maps covered every wall, marked with red circles indicating known CJNG operations across 5 states. Tommy Reaper Chen was coordinating with military precision, his Afghanistan combat experience transforming raw anger into tactical strategy. Bull Patterson was on 3 phones simultaneously, calling in favors from chapters, allied clubs, and even rival organizations who were willing to temporarily set aside differences because shooting a girl at a rally violated codes that transcended club politics. And Vincent was trapped in the worst position of his life, knowing information that could prevent bloodshed but unable to share it without destroying 3 years of undercover work and potentially letting Sofia Vega escape justice. Agent Sarah Morrison had sent him 7 encrypted messages in the last hour, each one more insistent than the last. "Do not compromise your position. We're 48 hours from having enough evidence to arrest Vega and dismantle her entire network. If you break cover now, she disappears and we lose everything. Stand down, Martinez." That's a direct order. But Vincent was watching Wade Stone's face, seeing the barely controlled grief and rage in a man he'd come to genuinely respect despite being assigned to eventually arrest him, and he couldn't shake the memory of his own sister's funeral, of standing over her casket and wishing someone had been willing to act instead of following protocol and procedure while she died alone in a motel room with a needle in her arm. Tommy spread a new map across the main table, this one showing real-time locations of known CJNG associates based on intelligence the club had been gathering for months. "We've identified 37 targets across Arizona, Nevada, California, New Mexico, and Texas. Stash houses, distribution centers, money laundering operations, even a few legitimate businesses they use as fronts. My proposal is, we hit them all simultaneously at 0400 tomorrow, maximum damage in minimum time before law enforcement can coordinate a response. We're not trying to kill people, we're trying to send a message. They shot a girl at a family event. We burn their world down." Bull nodded his massive head in agreement, his scarred knuckles drumming against the table in a rhythm that suggested barely restrained violence. "I've got commitments from 18 different chapters, plus the Vagos have offered support, and even some Hells Angels chapters are willing to coordinate their own hits on CJNG operations in their territories. This is bigger than club rivalry now. This is about respect, about honor, about the fact that there are supposed to be fucking rules even in our world, and CJNG just broke the most important one." Vincent knew he should stay silent, knew that his role as Ghost Martinez was to be the loyal soldier who followed orders without question. But he also knew that Sofia Vega was currently liquidating assets and preparing escape routes, that she'd already started eliminating her own people to cover her tracks, and that the DEA's careful investigation was about to be destroyed by a war that would scatter all the witnesses and evidence to the wind. "What if this wasn't CJNG leadership?" he said quietly, his voice cutting through the planning discussion. "What if someone inside the cartel wanted to start this war for their own reasons?" The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at him. Tommy's eyes narrowed with the suspicion of a military intelligence officer who'd learned to spot deception. "What do you know, Ghost?" Vincent felt the weight of 40 sets of eyes on him, felt the phone in his pocket buzzing with another message from Morrison that he didn't need to read to know was ordering him to shut up. He thought about his sister, about the DEA's carefully constructed case, about the oath he'd taken and the badge he carried in a hidden compartment of his bike. He thought about Maya Stone lying in a hospital bed with tubes in her chest, about Wade Stone's tears in that hallway, about the 3,500 bikers who were about to go to war based on incomplete information. I know that Sofia Vega has been positioning herself to take over CJNG's U.S. operations for the last 18 months, Vincent said, committing to a choice that would change everything. I know that she's been eliminating rivals within the cartel and making it look like external threats or internal disputes. I know that the shooter, Alejandro Mendoza, reports directly to her and not to Joaquin Morales, who's supposed to be running operations. And I know that she wanted Wade dead because a war with the Mongols would destabilize Joaquin's leadership and give her the opening she needs to seize power. The room exploded into questions, demands for proof, accusations about how he could possibly know all this. Vincent held up his hand, his heart hammering, because what he was about to say would end his career and possibly his life. I know all this because I'm DEA, have been for 3 years, and I'm breaking every protocol and destroying my career by telling you this, but I can't watch 3,500 of you go to war against the wrong people. Bull had his gun out before Vincent finished speaking. The massive .45 pointed steadily at Vincent's chest. Tommy had moved to block the door, his own weapon drawn. A dozen other members had their hands on various firearms, the room suddenly crackling with the kind of violence that could erupt in a heartbeat. Wade Stone, who'd been silent in the corner processing updates about Maya's condition, finally spoke. "Lower your weapons." His voice carried absolute authority, the kind that couldn't be questioned. "Ghost, or whatever your real name is, give me one reason why I shouldn't let Bull put a bullet in your head right now. You've been lying to us for 3 years. You've been in our homes, around our families, pretending to be a brother while gathering evidence to put us all in prison. Why the hell should I believe anything you say?" Vincent kept his hands visible, his voice steady despite the multiple guns pointed at him. "Because my sister died from a fentanyl overdose 3 years ago, and the last thing she said to me was that she wished someone had cared enough to stop the people who sold her the poison. Because I joined the DEA thinking I could make a difference, but all I've done is watch good people die while we build cases and follow procedures and let the real monsters escape because we're always worried about jurisdiction and evidence and making sure we can get convictions. Because Maya got shot today, and I have information that could help you get actual justice instead of just revenge. And because Sofia Vega is planning to disappear in the next 48 hours, and if we don't stop her now, she'll kill more girls like Maya, more families like yours, and nobody will ever hold her accountable." Wade studied Vincent's face for what felt like an eternity, his expression unreadable. Finally, he gestured to Bull, who slowly lowered his weapon but didn't put it away. "You're going to tell us everything you know. Everything. The DEA's case, Sofia's plans, where she is, how we can get to her. And then we're going to decide whether you live or die. But either way, your career as a federal agent is over the moment you walked into this room and opened your mouth." Vincent nodded, accepting the terms, and pulled out his phone to show them the intelligence files he'd been compiling for 3 years. As he spread documents and photos across the table, Agent Sarah Morrison's final message came through. "If you've done what I think you've done, you're on your own. DEA disavows all knowledge. You're fired, Martinez." 300 miles away in a fortified compound outside Guadalajara, Sofia La Reina Vega was hosting a dinner meeting with 6 of CJNG's senior lieutenants, men who'd served the organization for decades and who represented the old guard that she needed to eliminate. Joaquin El Jefe Morales sat at her right hand, still believing she was his loyal second-in-command, still trusting the intelligence she fed him about threats and opportunities. The wine she'd served them was expensive, imported from France, and laced with enough fentanyl to kill them all within 20 minutes. She'd learned years ago that the most effective assassinations looked like accidents or natural causes, that poison was cleaner than bullets and drew less attention from authorities who might otherwise investigate. "Joaquin, we need to discuss the Nevada situation," Sofia said smoothly, her wine glass untouched while the men around her drank freely. "Alejandro's failure has created a crisis. The Mongols are mobilizing thousands of members. American law enforcement is paying attention. We need decisive leadership to navigate this challenge. Joaquin nodded, already looking slightly unfocused as the drug began to work on his system. What do you suggest? Sophia smiled, the expression not reaching her eyes. I suggest we make a gesture of good faith. Turn over Alejandro to the Mongols. Let them have their justice. It shows we don't condone attacking children, and it might satisfy their need for revenge without requiring a full-scale war. What Joaquin didn't know was that Alejandro was already dead, his body dissolved in acid 3 hours after he'd returned to the safe house following the shooting. What he also didn't know was that Sophia had already contacted leaders of rival cartels, offering them CJNG territory in exchange for supporting her coup when Joaquin and his loyalists were eliminated. The pieces were all in place. Within an hour, everyone at this table would be dead. Within 48 hours, she would be the undisputed leader of CJNG's U.S. operations. And within a week, she would broker peace with the Mongols by sacrificing enough of Joaquin's allies that they would feel justice had been served, never knowing that she'd orchestrated the entire conflict from the beginning. But Sophia had made one critical miscalculation. She'd assumed that Vincent Martinez was just another low-level member of the Mongols, another criminal she could manipulate or eliminate as needed. She hadn't known he was DEA, hadn't known that the intelligence she thought she'd hidden so carefully had been documented and photographed and recorded for 3 years. And she definitely hadn't known that, at this very moment, Vincent was showing Wade Stone and 40 senior Mongols members a file that contained her entire operation, including the location of this compound and the details of tonight's assassination of Joaquin and his loyalists. Back in the Mongols' war room, Tommy studied the intelligence Vincent had provided with the analytical mind of a military tactician. This changes everything. If Sophia wanted this war, if she manipulated Alejandro into taking that shot, then she's the target. Not the cartel as a whole, not Joaquin or his people, just Sophia and whatever security she's got protecting her. Wade nodded slowly, his mind processing the tactical implications even as his heart screamed for immediate revenge against anyone connected to what happened to Maya. Can we get to her? Tonight? Vincent pulled up satellite imagery of Sophia's compound on his laptop, the same imagery the DEA had been using to plan their eventual raid. Heavily fortified, private security force of about 20 men, surveillance systems covering every approach. The DEA was planning a multi-agency raid with helicopters and tactical teams. You'd need an army to get through her defenses. Bull cracked his knuckles with a sound like breaking branches. We've got 3,500 bikers rolling toward Nevada right now. That's a pretty good army. Tommy shook his head. By the time we mobilize and get to Guadalajara, she'll know we're coming. She's got sources everywhere, probably even inside law enforcement. We need surgical precision, not overwhelming force. A new voice spoke from the doorway, making everyone turn. What if I told you the DEA was planning to raid that compound in 72 hours, and what if I told you that raid could happen sooner if certain intelligence became available to the right people? Agent Sarah Morrison stepped into the room, her badge visible on her belt, her hands carefully away from her weapon. Behind her stood 3 other DEA agents, all armed, all watching the room full of outlaw bikers with professional wariness. Before anyone gets excited, we're not here to arrest anyone. We're here because I've spent 6 months building a case against Sofia Vega, and I'll be damned if I let 3 years of my agent's work get destroyed because he decided to grow a conscience. Vincent stared at his former handler in confusion. You said I was fired. You said DEA disavowed me. Sarah's expression was grim. I said that because this entire conversation is being recorded by the Justice Department, and we need plausible deniability for what I'm about to propose. Martinez, you're officially terminated from DEA employment for compromising an undercover operation. Unofficially, you're about to help us bring down one of the most dangerous criminals in North America, and in exchange, we're going to forget that this room full of people has committed approximately 4,000 federal crimes between them. She turned to Wade. Your daughter is in that hospital because Sofia Vega wanted to start a war. My partner died 2 years ago because Sofia Vega ordered his execution when he got too close to her operation. We both want the same thing, Sofia Vega in a cell or in the ground. So here's what I'm proposing. Agent Morrison spread her own maps and intelligence files across the table, right next to the Mongols' targeting information, creating a surreal image of law enforcement and outlaws working side by side. Sofia is hosting a dinner tonight where she plans to poison 6 CJNG lieutenants, including Joaquin Morales. She thinks she's being clever, consolidating power through elimination. What she doesn't know is that we've had surveillance on that compound for 8 months. We have audio, video, we have her ordering hits, we have financial records of her entire operation. We were waiting until we had enough evidence to guarantee conviction. But Martinez's decision to break cover has accelerated our timeline. We can't raid that compound tonight without Mexican government approval, which takes time we don't have. But what if someone else provided the distraction we needed? What if 500 bikers showed up at Sofia's front gate making noise and drawing attention while a small tactical team went over the back wall? What if the chaos of that confrontation gave us the cover we needed to extract her and her evidence before she could destroy it? Tommy's eyes lit up with understanding. You want us to be your distraction. Create enough chaos that she focuses on us while you grab her from behind. Wade looked between Agent Morrison and Vincent, processing the implications of what was being proposed. You're asking us to trust federal agents. You're asking us to work with the DEA, the same people who've been trying to put us in prison for decades. Sarah nodded. Yes, I am, because right now we have a common enemy, and sometimes the enemy of your enemy becomes your ally, even if it's temporary. Sofia Vega shot your daughter to start a war. Are you more interested in revenge against the entire CJNG, most of whom didn't know anything about the shooting? Or are you interested in justice against the actual person responsible? The room fell silent as Wade considered the question, as every person there weighed their hatred of law enforcement against their desire to see Maya's shooter brought to justice. Finally, Bull spoke, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. My brother died because 2 gangs went to war over something that turned out to be a misunderstanding. By the time anyone figured out the truth, 12 people were dead, including my baby brother who was just in the wrong place at the wrong moment. If Sofia manipulated this whole thing, if she's the real target, then that's where we focus. We can hate the DEA tomorrow. Tonight, we work together. Wade looked at the photo of Sofia Vega that Vincent had provided, studying the face of the woman who'd ordered the hit that nearly killed his daughter. You get us in position to distract her security. We make enough noise that she has to respond. Your tactical team grabs her and whatever evidence you need. And in exchange, we forget that we saw your faces here tonight. And you forget about whatever charges you might have been building against my club. Agent Morrison extended her hand. Deal. But we do this by my rules, on my timeline, and nobody dies unless absolutely necessary. Sofia Vega is worth more to us alive and talking than dead and martyred. Wade shook her hand, sealing an alliance that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. Then let's go get the bitch who shot my daughter. Bloco 3/3, aproximadamente 2,500 palavras. The convoy that rolled toward the Mexican border 6 hours later was unlike anything the Southwest had ever seen. 500 Mongols members on their Harleys, riding in tight formation with the discipline of a military operation, their engines creating a thunder that could be heard for miles. Hidden among them were 3 unmarked DEA vehicles carrying Agent Morrison's tactical team, their presence known only to Wade, Tommy, and Bull. Vincent rode near the front, no longer wearing a wire, no longer bound by DEA protocols, existing in a strange liminal space between the law he'd sworn to uphold and the brotherhood he'd infiltrated but somehow grown to respect. Tommy had coordinated the approach with precision that impressed even Agent Morrison. We hit the front gate at exactly 0200 hours, Bull leads the first wave, makes maximum noise, demands Sophia come out to face justice for Maya. We're not actually trying to breach the compound, we're creating theater. Loud, aggressive, impossible to ignore. That pulls all her security to the front, gives Morrison's team their window to come over the back wall. He looked at Morrison directly. Your people have 15 minutes once we engage. After that, Mexican police will respond and we all need to be gone before they arrive. Sofia Vega had been feeling satisfied as she watched Joaquin and his lieutenants begin to succumb to the poison, their movements becoming sluggish, their speech slurring, when her head of security burst into the dining room. Senora, we have a problem. Reports are coming in of hundreds of motorcycles heading toward the compound. Someone leaked our location. Sophia's mind raced, calculating possibilities. The Mongols had found her faster than she'd expected, but her compound was fortress-like. They couldn't breach her defenses with motorcycles and small arms. This was desperation, not strategy. Lock down the compound, kill anyone who tries to come over the walls, and contact our people in Mexican police. Tell them we have an invasion force attacking us. I want them here within 30 minutes. What Sophia didn't know was that Agent Morrison had already contacted those same police through DEA channels, requesting they delay response for 1 hour to allow a joint operation to proceed. The Mexican authorities, who'd been wanting Sophia gone for years but lacked evidence to move against her, were happy to give the Americans their window. At precisely 0200 hours, Bull Patterson's massive voice boomed through a megaphone that seemed to shake the compound's walls. Sofia Vega! You shot a 19-year-old girl at a family rally. You started a war. Come out and face justice, or we're coming in to get you. 500 engines revved in unison, creating a wall of sound that was designed to intimidate and overwhelm. Searchlights from the compound illuminated the bikers, revealing the largest show of force the outlaw world had ever coordinated. Sophia's security team rushed to the front walls, weapons trained on the sea of leather and chrome that had appeared as if summoned from hell itself. Hold your fire, Sophia commanded through her security radios. They're posturing. They can't actually breach the walls. Just keep them contained until police arrive. But while her entire security apparatus focused on the spectacle at the front gate, Agent Morrison's 6-person tactical team was already coming over the back wall using climbing equipment and night vision goggles. Inside the compound, Joaquin Morales had collapsed completely, his body convulsing as the fentanyl overwhelmed his system. The other 5 lieutenants were in various stages of dying, their bodies shutting down while Sophia watched with cold satisfaction despite the chaos erupting outside. She'd achieved her goal. Within minutes, she would be the last senior leader standing, perfectly positioned to negotiate with the Mongols from a position of strength once they realized they couldn't breach her defenses. Except that Morrison's team was already in the house, moving through corridors with tactical efficiency, their weapons equipped with suppressors, their communication running on encrypted channels that Sophia's security couldn't monitor. Agent Morrison found Sophia in the dining room, standing over Joaquin's dying body with the expression of triumph that vanished the moment she saw the DEA badge. Sofia Vega, you're under arrest for drug trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 40 other charges we'll discuss in detail during the next decade you spend in American custody. Sophia's hand moved toward her purse where she kept a small pistol, but Morrison's weapon was already trained on her center mass. Don't. We have this entire room on video, including you poisoning your own leadership. We have 3 years of financial records. We have testimony from 17 cooperating witnesses. You're done, Sophia. The only question now is whether you come quietly or whether we add resisting arrest to your charges. For a moment, Sophia considered fighting, considered dying here rather than spending life in an American prison. Then she looked at the DEA team surrounding her, at the professional competence in their movements, and made the calculation that had kept her alive for 48 years. Sometimes you fight, and sometimes you survive to fight another day. She raised her hands slowly. I want a lawyer. and I want to discuss what information I might provide in exchange for reduced charges." Morrison smiled without humor. "We'll discuss that after we're safely across the border. Team, package her up. We're leaving in 2 minutes." Outside, Bull was still shouting demands through the megaphone, but Sophia's security team had started to realize something was wrong. Communication from inside the house had gone silent. Movement on the back wall suggested a breach they'd been too focused on the front to notice. The head of security was reaching for his radio to pull men back when Tommy gave the signal, and the 500 Mongols began a coordinated retreat, their engines roaring to life simultaneously. They'd accomplished their mission. They'd provided the distraction Morrison needed. Now they needed to disappear before Mexican police arrived and turned this into an international incident. Vincent rode next to Wade as they crossed back into the United States, the adrenaline of the operation still coursing through his veins. Wade hadn't spoken to him directly since the revelation in the war room, and Vincent wasn't sure if he'd survive the next conversation. Finally, as they pulled into a truck stop 20 miles north of the border, Wade gestured for Vincent to follow him away from the others. "I should kill you," Wade said quietly, his voice carrying no particular emotion. "You lied to us for 3 years. You were gathering evidence to destroy my club. Everything you did, every moment of brotherhood, was fake." Vincent met his eyes steadily. "Not everything. The first year, yeah, I was just playing a role. But somewhere in year 2, after your mother died and you let me help plan the funeral, after Bull's daughter graduated college and he cried telling me he was the first person in his family to see a kid get a degree after I watched Tommy fight his PTSD demons and keep showing up anyway, it stopped being just a job. I'm not saying it made the lying okay. I'm saying that I started to understand what brotherhood actually meant, even if I was there under false pretenses." Wade was silent for a long moment. "Maya's alive because you broke cover. Because you chose to destroy your career rather than let us go to war against the wrong people. That counts for something." He extended his hand slowly. "You can never wear our patch again. You can never be in a clubhouse or at a rally or anywhere near official club business. But if you ever need help, if Sophia's people come after you, if anyone tries to settle a score, you call me. You're not a brother anymore, but you're also not an enemy. You're something in between, and that's the best I can offer." Vincent shook his hand, feeling the finality of it. "That's more than I deserve. Thank you." As he walked away toward his bike, Bull approached Wade with concern evident on his scarred face. "You letting him go, boss? Just like that?" Wade watched Vincent's retreating back. "He gave up everything to help us get justice for Maya. He didn't have to do that. Sometimes honor matters more than revenge, Bull. Besides, Morrison got what she wanted. Sophia's in custody. We got what we wanted. The person who shot Maya is facing justice. And Vincent gets to live with his choices, whatever they cost him." 3 months later, Maya Stone sat in a courtroom in San Diego watching Sofia Vega's trial through its final days. The bullet wound had healed, leaving a scar she touched sometimes when she was nervous, a permanent reminder of how close she'd come to death. Her testimony had been powerful, describing the moment she'd been shot, the fear and confusion, the blood and pain. But more importantly, she'd testified about the aftermath, about the investigation that had revealed Sophia's manipulation, about the choice her father had made to work with law enforcement rather than pursue a path of endless revenge. Sophia had been offered a deal, life in prison without parole in exchange for testimony against dozens of other cartel members. She'd taken it, calculating that life in an American prison was better than the death sentence she'd face if CJNG ever got their hands on her. As the judge read the sentence, Sophia's eyes found Maya's across the courtroom. There was no remorse there, no apology, just cold assessment of a plan that had failed. Maya held her gaze steadily, refusing to look away, refusing to give this woman the satisfaction of seeing fear. When Sophia was finally led away in chains, Maya felt something release in her chest that she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Wade and Isabella waited outside the courthouse, having chosen not to attend the trial itself. Maya found them sitting on a bench, holding hands in that way couples do after decades of marriage when they've survived something that should have torn them apart. "It's over," Maya told them. "Life without parole. She'll never hurt anyone again." Wade pulled his daughter into a hug that was gentle because of her still healing injuries but fierce because of everything they'd survived together. "I'm proud of you, Maya Bear. For testifying, for being brave, for surviving all of this." 6 months after the shooting, Vincent Martinez sat in a small apartment in Portland under a name that wasn't his own, working as a mechanic and trying to build a life that didn't involve lying about who he was. The DEA had officially terminated him, but Agent Morrison had quietly arranged for him to receive his full pension and benefits under his new identity. She'd also passed along a message from Sophia during one of her debriefing sessions. "Tell Martinez he's on my list. When I get out, and I will eventually get out, I'm coming for everyone who put me here." Vincent had changed his locks, varied his routines, and slept with a gun under his pillow. Some prices you paid forever. Tommy Reaper Chen had started therapy for his PTSD after the Sophia operation, finally acknowledging that the nightmares and hypervigilance were getting worse rather than better. His therapist, a former Army psychologist who specialized in combat trauma, had helped him understand that seeking help wasn't weakness, but another kind of courage. He still rode with the Mongols, still served as road captain, but he'd stopped pretending that he was fine when he wasn't. Bull told him he was the bravest man in the club, and coming from Bull, that meant something. 1 year after the shooting, Maya Stone stood at a podium at UC San Diego addressing a campus rally about gun violence and criminal justice reform. She'd changed her major from pre-med to criminal justice, her experience having transformed her understanding of violence, revenge, and the complex choices people made in impossible situations. "I was shot because one woman wanted power and was willing to sacrifice innocent lives to get it," Maya told the crowd of students. "My father could have responded with unlimited violence. He had 3,500 bikers ready to go to war. But he chose something harder. He chose to work with people he'd spent his entire life seeing as enemies because justice mattered more than revenge. That's the lesson I carry from that day, that we can break cycles of violence if we're brave enough to make different choices." In the audience, Wade Stone sat in the back row wearing a suit instead of his leather cut, trying to be inconspicuous at his daughter's college event. Beside him, Isabella squeezed his hand as they listened to their daughter turn her trauma into advocacy, watched her transform pain into purpose. When Maya finished speaking to thunderous applause, Wade had tears streaming down his face. Not tears of grief this time, but pride. His daughter had survived, had grown, had become someone who chose to heal wounds rather than inflict them. Agent Sarah Morrison watched Maya's speech through a video feed in her office, writing a final report on the Sofia Vega case that would be classified for the next 25 years. The unconventional alliance between the DEA and the Mongols would never be publicly acknowledged. Officially, it had been a purely federal operation. But Morrison knew the truth, and she'd made sure it was documented in sealed files that might one day inform future operations. Sometimes justice required strange alliances. Sometimes the badge and the patch could work toward the same goal, even if only temporarily, even if it violated every protocol in the book. The final paragraph of her report read, "The Sofia Vega investigation and arrest demonstrated that when presented with complete information and offered a path to genuine justice, even criminal organizations can make rational choices that serve the greater good." While the Mongols Motorcycle Club remains under investigation for numerous illegal activities, their cooperation in this specific operation prevented a war that would have cost dozens of lives and destabilized criminal and law enforcement operations across 5 states. Agent Vincent Martinez sacrificed his career to make this outcome possible and should be recognized, even if that recognition must remain classified. Sometimes the line between the good guys and the bad guys is less clear than we'd like to believe, and sometimes justice requires us to acknowledge that complexity rather than pretend it doesn't exist. 3 years after the shooting, Maya Stone graduated with honors from UC San Diego with a degree in criminal justice and had been accepted to law school. Her graduation speech talked about second chances, about the power of choosing peace over violence, about her father who'd taught her that strength sometimes meant restraint. In the audience, Wade sat with Isabella, Bull, Tommy, and 36 Mongols members who'd known Maya since she was a child. They cheered louder than anyone else when she received her diploma, these rough men who society feared celebrating a young woman who'd survived their world and chosen to make it better. After the ceremony, Maya introduced her father to her law school advisor, a former federal prosecutor who'd agreed to mentor her. "Professor Anderson, this is my father, Wade Stone." The professor shook Wade's hand professionally, clearly recognizing the Mongols' president but choosing to focus on what mattered. "Your daughter is going to make an excellent attorney, Mr. Stone. She has a unique perspective on justice that most law students lack. She understands that the world isn't black and white, that people are complex, and that sometimes the path to justice requires unconventional thinking." Wade smiled. "She gets that from her mother. The stubbornness she gets from me." Their story serves as a reminder that violence creates cycles that can consume generations, but those cycles can be broken by people brave enough to make different choices. It's a reminder that justice and revenge aren't the same thing, that working with your enemies toward a common goal doesn't make you weak but pragmatic, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose healing over hatred. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content exploring the complex moral choices we face when everything we love is threatened. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to break the cycle, to choose peace over endless war, to believe that even in the darkest circumstances, people can surprise you by choosing to be better than their worst impulses.